Saturday, May 18th, and the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. You know, I want to tell you, for the last probably 25 out of 26 years, I have attended every Preakness in Baltimore, Maryland. As you can see from some of the photos and the footage, you can see me with AD, my executive producer. It's been who's who for the last decades upon decades. And I'm going to tell you, the Super Bowl is the best sporting event in the world, hands down, the Super Bowl. But after the Super Bowl, Grand Slam was pretty good. I got to tell you something, Grand Slam championships, tennis are pretty good. But coming in a close second are the runnings of the Triple Crown. You know, the Kentucky Derby was the first weekend in May. The Preakness is today, and then we have up in New York, we have the last leg of the Triple Crown. And so, to me, it is spectacular because I grew up with horses. I love horses. And it's just another thrilling chapter in the story annals of horse racing. I mean, the historic race today, the second of the famed Triple Crown, and the third one is the Belmont. I had a buy moment there for a minute, but it's the Belmont. We all have those buy moments, by the way. It's not just buying. Not only does it test the speed and the heart of these magnificent thoroughbreds, but also the skill and strategy of the jockeys and trainers who are prepared for this moment all their lives. And as this elite competition and competitors thunder down the track at Pimlico, they carry with them the legacy of legends past, each striving not just for victory. You remember Aloma's Rule, Secretariat? Remember how Barbaro died? I was right there. I think AD was with me. We were right there at the finish line when Barbaro fell and they put Barbaro to sleep. I was there for all those great moments, but it's all for a place in the eternal pantheon of the greats. So join us for now, just for this segment, as we experience the passion and the glory of this timeless spectacle. But Tom Garner, who is the jockey, the man, my man, he has that British accent. His wife, Devin, who's our HHS international correspondent, who's been with us for a long time. That's his wife. They just had a baby. Congratulations, Tom. Little Sophie, congratulations on your newborn. Baby weighs 7 pounds. So happy for Devin. But anyhow, my man is a steeplechase jockey based in the United States. So, Tom, as a steeplechase jockey, how do you prepare differently for the different races that you run around the world compared to the usual races that people are accustomed to? What is the steeple? What is that all about?
So obviously the main difference is we ride over obstacles. It's a bit more dangerous. Obviously my wife does it. She's not really a fan of me doing it. But it's very different to just running on a track. I think I think every track in the US is left-handed. The only real different one that I've seen is Kentucky Downs, because that's undulating. But that was originally actually built to be a steeplechase track. But it's very different. When I go to different countries like France and Czech Republic, there's so many different maps of a course that we have to remember each race. And it's very easy to go wrong. And I actually rode in a race in Virginia on Saturday that I was the only finisher, just purely because the other three took the wrong course. And the one finished with me, but didn't realise that it missed a beacon. So it's completely different to running around a track like Pimlico or Laurel. I like to say it's a bit more skilled, but I think the flat jockeys will disagree with me. But it's enjoyable. It's fun. I think it's definitely a fun watch for spectators as well.
No, I think you were just referring to the Gold Cup in Virginia where you won that race. The weather, the muddy track, talk about the impact on the weather. You know, we were there with you last year in 2023 when you won a couple of those races. And I got to tell you something. Talk about how the weather impacts the running of these horses.
Well, every horse has its sort of favourable ground. Obviously, we only run on grass. So I think when we woke up on Saturday morning, the going at Great Meadow was firm. We hadn't had much rain, and the ground was very, very hard. We had a lot of rain that morning, and it went to soft ground, which suited one of the horses I was riding, which went and won. But every horse is different. Every horse favours different ground, different conditions. So it changes very quickly, and it's there's so many different aspects to what sort of the everyday person would see that goes into actually sort of benefiting from. You might look at a race card and think, I fancy that horse just because it's got course and distance form, or it's got different form, but there's a lot of more aspects of sort of ground, going, jockey, distance that suits different horses. And there's a lot more to it than just going to pick your favourite colour or favourite jockey, favourite name.
Obviously, you know the rich history of the Triple Crown races in the United States. You know, the Preakness Stakes is known for its rich history and tradition, as well as the Kentucky Derby and the Belmont Stakes. Can you share with us what it really means for a jockey that you've talked to and you've studied the history of these events? What does it mean for a jockey to compete in such a prestigious event, what it can mean for their career?
Oh, it's huge. You just have to look at Brian Hernandez that won the Kentucky Derby. He's been trying for years. His whole family is in sport, and it's just that. I know you were mentioning the Super Bowl earlier being one of the greatest. I kind of disagree because the Soccer World Cup's the greatest for an Englishman, but not that we've won it for a while. But for a jockey to be even riding in the Kentucky Derby is a huge thing. There's probably not even 0.1% of all the jockeys in the world get to ride in those Grade 1 races. There's thousands and thousands of jockeys that you'd never heard of, you'd never see, that go to day in, day out at different racetracks that would never get the opportunity to ride in those big races. So to be one of those, I can't remember actually how many starters there were, but let's just say there was 15 starters, to be one of those 15 people that get to ride in the race, just even to ride in it, even if you could be on a complete outsider, it's a complete honour, and it's the pinnacle of your sport. Like for example, in steeplechasing, the Grand National in England is the best race that I grew up watching. There used to be 40 runners, now there's only 34. They've limited the field, but to be one of those 40 jockeys, to be in it, even if you were to go and fall at the first, just to be there and be in it and tell the grandkids that you did it would just be special. I unfortunately they have 3 reserves. I was actually on the reserve list twice for horses that didn't get in. So I've never got to ride in it in my career so far. There might be time, don't tell the wife, but it's looking unlikely. But just to be taking part in those races is just a complete honour. But to be on a favourite couldn't be out of this world.
You know, everyone knows about the famous Ascot in England, which you guys often attend, and you know everybody dresses up and the women wear the fancy hats. And the Ascot was Queen Elizabeth's favorite race and per time to participate. Talk about what is so unique about Ascot as it compared to the Triple Crown races here in America.
Oh, Royal Ascot, well, it's one of my favourite weeks of the year, even though it's flat racing, and obviously I'm steeplechasing. There's 3 good weeks. Cheltenham Festival, which is basically like the Olympics of steeplechasing in England and Ireland. But Royal Ascot is world renowned. We have horses from all over the world that come and compete there. It's 5 days, Tuesday to Saturday. And I think on the Tuesday, there's 5 Group 1s, and there's Group 1s throughout the week. It's just the most spectacular event I'm obviously being biased, but it is fantastic. And Armstrong, I can't wait to see you in a top hat there one day.
Oh, now listen, I wear the top hat, bro. Let me be clear with you. And I hate to say it.
I've seen you in tails.
No, you see me. Let me tell you, I'm told I look good in the top hat. I won't get into that, but I like the top hat. But listen, talk about what it takes to care for these horses, to prepare them for the races, the training, the medicine, the expenses that is required. I spent a morning with you and Devin at your horse stables and to see what you had to do in terms of riding them, making sure you're exercising them, feeding them, giving them the proper shots. Talk about the care of these animals.
Oh, this is the everyday person doesn't really see, and for sort of for the animal rights people, they don't really understand how much care and dedication goes into to the sport and to the animals. Like the girls that go in and look after them every single day, they have a really special bond with these horses, and they're like kids to them. But like I get up at 6 o'clock most mornings, go down and feed, and then the guys that come work for me come in and take care of the horse. But I'm gonna go grey soon just thinking about them at night, because the care that goes into these animals, it really is 24/7, and they do get the best care in the world. From when they're born to when they retire, there's a very big rehabilitation for racehorses now, so they don't go on to worse things. They go on to have other jobs in equine. They go on to be event horses or show horses. They really do live some great lives, and it's only getting better. The awareness for life after racing is getting more and more, and it's something I'm quite proud of, that we're doing more about it. But the care that goes into them is second to none.
You know, and finally, given your experience on different tracks, and today is the Preakness, how does Pimlico's track compare? And what strategies would you advise a jockey who's considered essential to have any kind of success today on Pimlico racetrack and the running of the 149th Preakness Stakes?
Well, I actually take some of my horses to gallop at Pimlico, and it's a very small track. It's a very the track is, the dirt's actually a very good surface. It's fantastic, and I hear they're going to do some work on the actual grandstands and things. I think it's fantastic, because I think it's a fantastic surface. It's a fantastic track. It's very tight, but you're probably asking the wrong person how to ride the Preakness, because I don't think I've never ridden I've never ridden a dirt race, but just like I said before, just to be in it is just be special.
Well, Tom, listen, it is a pleasure having you on. Quickly, what is it like being a father?
Amazing. Yeah, she's fantastic. She's behaving so far. I'll probably walk out the door and she'll be crying, but it's fantastic, and we're both overwhelmed.
And what do you want to say to your wife and your mother on this Mother's Day weekend? Because it is Mother's Day weekend.
Well, Devon's first Mother's Day. I better put my finger out and do something special for her. So, we'll see. But yeah, no, it's nice.
Well, Mother's Day is next weekend, but it's okay. Every weekend, every day is Mother's Day. Thank you, Adine. Thank you, Tom, for joining us. When we come back, we're going to talk about the economy and financial markets. It's Preakness weekend. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. And welcome back to the broadcast. We're happy to be joined by Andrew Donaldson, commentator with Young Voices, Steve Laffey, former presidential candidate, Christian, Republican, conservative, populist, my man Jordan Goodman, America's Money Answers man. You know, I'm going to start with my man, Steve Laffey. You know, I was going to go straight into the finances and the economy, but you know, I got to talk about things that they're not prepared for. But you know, Steve, I find it interesting that you see yourself as a Christian and conservative. You know, I posted on X recently, I've been watching and following the trials and tribulations of Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York City, and I've become fascinated by it. And it is amazing to me how he gets so much sympathy, particularly from people who see themselves as Trumpsters. And so I tweeted, let me read my exact tweet, what I sent out. I said, Stormy Daniels is Donald Trump's creation, born out of his reckless disregard of Christian values. You reap what you sow in life. We all know that. When I sin, I pay a price. When I went through No Child Left Behind, even though the Lord forgave me, I was in the desert for almost 7 years. I still had to pay a price. We all sin and fall short. And I went on to say, Steve, he is compounding his venial sinning by preposterous denials rather than seeking redemption. Now, there is one thing that is obvious from the Donald Trump, Stormy Daniels show, is that he had a quickie. Call it whatever you want to. They slept together. From everything you hear. And, you know, and listen, we all fall short, but to ask for forgiveness and say I was wrong instead of just making excuses. Why is it that Christians, they are more than willing to point out Biden's faults, condemn him, whether it's Hunter Biden, whether it's China, no matter what it is, but yet they can make every excuse for Donald Trump? Is that a cult? Is that dangerous? Does that bother you, Steve?
Extraordinarily bothers me. I ran for president, and I could tell you that whether it's speaking to the leader of the Christian movement in Iowa, who wouldn't let me speak, but was letting a practicing Hindu speak, or going into church and seeing how people could really find excuses for Donald Trump's behavior. We do, as Christians, pray for Donald Trump, and we are sinners. You are right. We all are. But we can do a lot better. And for the Christian, many of the Christian view is to just say either didn't happen or, listen, we all know how he treats women. And we shouldn't have a president who treats women like that. Not just one person, it's dozens and dozens of people. So we have people who have been vetted who are not doing this. And we would have a better leader of the free world if we could just change the way we're doing things. But yes, this stuff being out in public in a trial with Stormy Daniels, you're a better man than me. I have to almost ignore it. It's too troubling. So I have to almost ignore this part and stick to the facts of what's going on with finance. But there's a whole segment of the Christian movement that tends to say, some people think he's a second coming. I've never understood any of this. I was, the part about abusing a woman, being found guilty in a civil court about it and being ordered to pay fines about it. Just a videotape of him grabbing women to get to know them by their private parts. That should have been enough to end anybody's campaign. President Trump has a disease called narcissism. And I do appreciate the conservative judges. I appreciate a lot of the stuff that President Trump accomplished. But it really, when you think about it, is all about him no matter what. And people who get to know anybody who touches him, their lives are changed immeasurably for the worse. Go ask Rudy Giuliani. He just dumps people as they go along. Another terrible characteristic of a man who shouldn't be president. It's very troubling. The lack of what people do, the lack of people mentioning Jesus' name who say they believe in God on public TV, running for office. If you ever talk to me on Trump, I talk about Jesus, so people know that I actually mean it in public life. I find it troubling that people just refer to God. I find a lot of this troubling. The world has changed immeasurably since I was a kid, and it keeps changing for the worse. And if we don't have, forget about the financial stuff, if we don't have some way to get back to God as a country, we are not going to have a country.
Andrew, imagine if Donald Trump was a Democrat. Imagine how the Republicans and other Christians would just, imagine what they would say about him. Can you imagine that? Imagine if Donald Trump was Barack Obama. Do you think Barack Obama or anybody else could get away with the things that Trump is doing to change the norms? And then they want to get upset with Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota because she lied and said she talked to Kim Jong-un at the DMZ in North Korea. We know she's lying, but listen, this is the era of Donald Trump. That pales in comparison to what Donald Trump has introduced to our body politic.
Yeah, I don't have to imagine it. I lived through it. My first election was the '98 midterm. That was the impeachment of Bill Clinton election. For those of you that don't remember that one, I've seen some of how this goes. And some of those folks that were on the Republican side of that thing are around and are some of Donald Trump's strongest supporters. So I don't really have to imagine it. I've watched it. I've watched it in real time. Look, the thing with Trump and Christianity and all this, Donald Trump had a lot of book on him when he ran for president. 30 years of being all over the tabloids. He liked it. He enjoyed it. He chased the back page of the New York papers and the tabloids and things like that. He likes that sort of stuff. That's who he's always been. He's been consistent. So then what I do is, if you want to talk about Christian things, we're warned to not judge, but we are commanded to do some fruit inspecting from time to time. The folks that changed what they thought because of Donald Trump, if you just want to say, okay, I know everything bad about Donald Trump, but I think he's going to pursue what I want, that's an honest answer. But a lot of people just started projecting what they wanted him to be, despite the 30, 40 years of very public book we had on the man. And now here we are. So we don't really have to imagine. We just got to parse it out, put it in history, know this is how things go. And here we are again.
Why? I don't understand. I don't.
Human nature. Human nature doesn't change.
But could it be that people feel so desperate in their way of life with their families, transgenderism, DEI, loss of their economy, the invasion on the border, more money to foreign entities. Migrants are changing the structure and the way of the life of the United States until they say, I could care less about morality anymore. Give me anybody, I don't care if it's Donald Trump, anybody over the policies that the Biden administration is putting in place. And if we give him 4 more years, it's going to be like, you're going to embolden him to do even more, which they seems to be, will be not as much in the best interest of this country. Could that be it, Steve?
I saw this is that most Republicans, or many Republicans I met in New Hampshire and Iowa, the people I talked to, are just girding for a fight. So to rephrase what you said, they just want to fight. They want to get rid of Democrats. And now it's like almost a fist fight with no solutions. And to that end, Donald Trump's a pretty good fighter. There's no doubt about that. And that's who they're going to back. And the inability for them to even, it's also where they're consuming information. And I wish it was all from you and your tweets, but it's really not. When I meet people who consume information without mentioning news sources, who are college-educated Republicans that I know, or not college-educated or advanced degrees, I'm appalled by where people get information from and what they actually believe that isn't true. So combine that with the loss of the middle class and those people who have joined up in the Trump Republican Party, they're not really what we call Republicans. They're just girding for a fight of what they think they've lost. They're not wrong. They lost their job to China. They're not wrong. They're not really interested in what some of these other solutions are. And if they think Trump will back them on that, they're just going to go forward and ignore everything else.
I think Andrew just put his finger on it. You know, it's one thing to admit, I know you're an adulterer. I know you're a liar. I know it's all about you. I know you don't share my values, but you did a pretty good job on the economy. You kept America safe from migrants. There were no wars going on during the time of your administration. So you know what? I'm going to vote for you, but I know the truth about you. But Andrew, they won't even admit the truth about him. It's the scary part.
No, this goes to the projection thing, is once you've gone all in on something, no matter what it is, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, it could be an indifferent thing, but once you go all in on it, you start committing to it. And when you commit to it, then you don't want to back off it, and then your perspective gets skewed. And then things like your integrity and your perception and your point of view, those things start going by the wayside. So even if you start with something good and you marinate it and lose all perspective, it can become a bad thing. Something like Donald Trump, where we know exactly who he is. He's never been, and to his credit, he's never pretended to be anything other than he really is, other than, lying about certain things he's done and things like this. He's consistent who he is. It's people that fool themselves in it, and you just touched on it a minute ago. You are what you marinate yourself in, especially when it comes to news and information. So if all you've done is marinate yourself on everybody else bad, my guy good, you lose all that perspective, and then you become gullible and susceptible, and you'll fall for anything because your entire prison world is, hey, my side good, everybody else bad, and that's not how the world works. And it certainly doesn't work when your plurality of voters is something like 30, 35, 40% of the country on a high end. That's probably a high number. And then you get started to get really confused and frustrated of why aren't I getting my way? Why don't my political party and my ideology rule everything, and you don't understand your part in a big pluralistic society? And then it goes to that frustration you talked about. They get mad, they get angry because they don't even understand the process that they're getting mad and angry about. Then you start chasing the boogeyman, and then you start looking for a messiah, even a bad one.
Why do we have this conversation? I know some people say, well, Armstrong, talk about Biden. That's all we talk about is Biden. All I do is criticize Biden. I'm one of his harshest critics. You look at my monologues and my columns, 98% of them about how bad Biden is. But guess what? I have a moral obligation because I'm free. My freedom comes from God, not from man. They can dislike me. They can untweet me. That's what they do. I don't care about those things. I sleep very well at night. Donald Trump is no victim, okay? Let me be clear on that. What has happened to Donald Trump has to do with the choices that he made in his life, and they're coming back full circle. Is it a kangaroo court? Yes. Is it a double standard of justice? Yes. Are they trivializing and humiliating the president? Yes. All those things are true. However, the reason why they're able to do it, because Donald J. Trump gave them the ammunition. Has he asked for redemption? Has he asked for forgiveness? Has he ever said, I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I owe you an apology, I'm going to do better? Has he? No. And we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. So, Joy Goodman, I decided to keep you out of that discussion because I know you like to deal with the financial markets, but it's good. Welcome to the broadcast. So, Joy Goodman, given the current economic climate, what do you feel are the key policies that need to be implemented to stimulate economic growth and help American businesses thrive?
Well, we still have very high interest rates. The Federal Reserve is not happy that inflation's come down enough. But if we could get interest rates down a little bit, that would certainly help stimulate growth. We have to invest in the part of the economy that's growing. Artificial intelligence, for example, is having a huge amount of investment in it, and that's going to be positive for productivity in the long term. And we've got to get people not so burdened by debt. I mean, consumers have a huge amount of debt right now, and start slowing them from buying other things because they're just servicing their existing debt.
Let me stay with you. With interest rates, Jordan, fluctuating, what advice do you have for homeowners looking to either refinance their mortgages or buy a new home in this market?
It's too late to refinance. I mean, you're getting about over 7% mortgage rates, about 7.3. So nobody's refinancing to a 7.3% mortgage. In fact, it's been the opposite. People who normally would have sold their homes, say baby boomers wanting to downsize, would normally be selling their homes today. But if they've got mortgages at 3 or 4%, they don't want to sell and get a mortgage at 7% plus. So that's why the supply of housing is a lot smaller than it used to be, because sellers don't want to sell and replace their mortgages with a much higher rate. So it's not about refinancing mortgages. A lot of people, Armstrong, are just priced out of the market right now. Between the prices of homes and where mortgages are, affordability is really at a low level right now.
You know, Andrew, what are the most critical impacts on the economy from your perspective, and what do you believe every American needs to understand in today's fluctuating economy?
Yeah, your question actually breaks down the problem, because policy-wise on paper, a lot of financial experts, the economy's in pretty good shape in a lot of ways, but as long as you go to the grocery store and groceries are costing you more money, to the point that even more higher income folks are really noticing things like grocery prices. Gas prices bounce around, but we know that's going to always, be a factor when people start paying attention. There's that very old joke, people only pay attention to the economy when gas prices go up and right around Christmas. Well, now with inflation and things like this, every time you go to the grocery store and you're just trying to buy food and it's way more expensive, those McDonald's value meals are all now over $10 a piece when they used to be $5 or $6. That's just stuff people are going to notice, and you can't policy speak those things away. However, folks also need to educate themselves on why that is and not just fall for every headline that goes by. So there's an information gap, but there's also a speaking gap amongst the people that do what we do, where we do talking heading, where you got to also explain, like, here's why inflation is going. There's a gap between the policy and the practical right now that's not serving anybody. And then the other thing is something that just got mentioned, personal debt. There was news out today about how Gen Z on a ratio and a proportion has got more debt than any other cohort right now as they enter adulthood. That's a massive problem. Personal debt, high interest rates, inflation. This is all stuff that is really impacting people, no matter how good the fundamentals of the economy are. That's stuff that we got to talk about directly and connect those two things between the policy and the practical for folks.
Steve, as a former presidential candidate, you have such a strong focus on populism and conservatism. How do you address the concerns of the working class American and with the economic policies, and also give us a broad view of what is the American economy today? Because it does seem everybody, without any doubt, has been impacted by COVID. It's just totally destroyed some economies. But when you look at the rest of the world, America seems to only be the only economy that is truly recovered, in some ways, are kind of thriving. Why?
Well, why? Because we still, despite all the regulations, despite the really bad things in government spending, America still is a fairly mobile, low regulation society compared to Europe, let's say. So that's one of the reasons that we still move around, we take jobs, we go to work. But to get how the economy is doing now, it is basically, I would say, I know people don't agree with this, we are now officially, in my estimation, entering a recession. I think it'll be a very bad one. How do you see these things happening? They happen quickly. So, for example, people were thinking when they got checks that if things went wrong again, they would still get more checks. So what did they do? Jobs were plentiful. They quit their jobs a number of times. They moved around. But what started to happen was that they ran out of that money and they turned to consumer credit. So credit card debt is now going, not straight up, but it's going up to now levels that are going to be very worrisome. That keeps going up. But the interesting is that if you look at discretionary spending, this is when you go to Starbucks and so forth, that was up, discretionary spending was up $100 billion in the first quarter of this year. But income was up $45 billion. What did people do to keep their level of living the same? They borrowed money. That is now ended. You can see in the recent reports from Starbucks, you can see in other companies like McDonald's, people are now changing their behavior. There aren't any more checks coming, at least till there's a new president. I hope they never come, but they are now going to change their behavior. And so the state of the economy is now very bad. Now, if you say that you just want a fuel-based economy run on debt, well, Joe Biden can deliver it, and so didn't President Trump. They can just spend a lot more and hope that there's an insatiable demand They're U.S. dollars and U.S. Treasury. So back to the first comment, it's really important. Just remember, the only person who didn't refinance the debt when it was able to do so, everybody did it with a home. Everybody did it with a business, which is why the refinancing and even commercial loans is the next year's story. And small businesses refinance. We didn't do it at the national debt. When rates were zero, when long-term 30-year treasuries were 2%, Janet Yellen didn't refinance our debt, even if it had to take 4%. And now we're left with issuing more short than long, which is now going to make everything coming off at 2% or 1% is now being reissued at 4 or 5%, and more of it short because people don't want to buy 10-year treasuries or 7-year treasuries. This is the real disaster coming together with the coming drop in consumer spending, which is 70% of our economy. That's what the economy is in bad shape.
Jordan, I am curious about your reply to what you just heard from Mr. Laffey.
Well, I mean, he's certainly right that the Treasury debt is rolling over at higher and higher interest rates, and we're continuing to add to it. We're adding about $1 trillion in debt every 100 days these days. We're up to about almost 35 trillion now. And again, debt that was issued 2 and 3 years ago at 1 or 2% is now rolling over at 4 and 5%. You have higher interest rates on more debt, and that just it's crowding out, the private sector. So that's a definite burden. Everything we've talked about before, as far as consumers, if they're paying 25% interest on their credit cards, they just have that much less income to buy non-discretionary kinds of things. People are feeling very, very squeezed these days.
Andrew, in terms of personal investments, how do you feel individuals need to adjust their portfolios to sort of mitigate risk associated with what many perceive to be a very volatile market?
It is volatile, and we know long term the best thing you can do is just kind of hang in there and don't do anything too drastic. Part of the problem going on right now is what was just discussed, though. If you're all your discretionary money and you're taking on debt to maintain a lifestyle standard that maybe you can't afford during a time of austerity or a time of downturn, that's the money you should be saving. That's the money you should be investing. So if folks are spending that money on other things, we laugh about the Starbucks thing, but look, I got a household of people that like Starbucks. That stuff's expensive. That kind of discretionary spending, when it should be going into investing and should be going into savings for when we do have a downturn and then have the upturn, and you've got that kind of money either saved or invested for when the comeback happens on down the road. This is the stuff you got to be ahead of a little bit when you're talking about these sort of things. So when it comes to investing, it still holds true. You don't want to panic just because it's bad times, but you also have to be prepared. And part of that preparation is getting your debt load down, getting your discretionary income down, and instead of doing discretionary income, doing some positive savings and investing. That's the sort of thing you got to do ahead of time. And if you're just now starting it, you're probably already behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Here's what's fascinating, is that no matter what the economy is, not just experts, but novices are still making it work, whether it's through the stock market, whether it's through real estate, whether it's through the new AI, whether it's reformatting and re-engineering their businesses. And are those people who are able to manage these troubled waters of the economy, are they just unique, Steve Laffey? Because some people make it look like a walk in the park.
You mean companies? You mean like certain companies? Well, yeah, it's a walk in the park if you have rapid growth within your company. That's great. Most companies don't do this. The ones that absorb the news on TV are ones like that. But the average everyday company, a guy who makes Caterpillar tractors, is seeing lots of problems. If you're operating out of China like Apple Computer, you're seeing lots of problems. That's a whole nother what's happening within the world as far as China's going to close down their economy because they have no people and no growth and they have to steal everything. And U.S. companies haven't been fast enough to get out of the country. So, there's also the dichotomy between the haves and the haves not. I mean, the bottom 50% of our country lives paycheck to paycheck. Bottom 58% of our country. The middle class, which used to be 70% of our country, is down to like 35%. What we call middle class, the people who maybe 2 people work They have a couple of kids. They're going to send a kid to a state school. They think their kids are doing better than they are. That was all set up in 1945 with policy. The Federal Reserve has destroyed that. You know, think about it. I mean, trying to keep up with making 100 grand from 2020 to today, you need 120 grand because inflation has taken that out of you on purpose and started under Donald Trump, not under Biden. Started on purpose under Donald Trump. Who would do it again, I think? Those programs, the PPP program. And so the middle class, the low 58% of the people, they're seeing things like, who got that PPP loan? Not me. Who didn't pay it back? Oh, that's what several congressmen and a bunch of people who didn't need it. And there's all kinds of fraud. So that's why they feel so disconnected. So we need policies to stop all this, stop the government spending, and bring back the middle class. But we don't have any. And we don't have anybody actually saying they want to do it.
Hold that point for Steve. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
It is fascinating that no matter who is elected president of the United States, and in this presidential season, whether it's Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or Robert F. Kennedy, what always seems to be the same, Andrew, Steve, is that the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. And I often wonder, Jordan, why is it that no matter who's in government, whether it's on the federal, state, or local level, people's lives not only stay the same, but they become more dependent on government.
Right.
And, you know, I go back to my days as a kid with my parents, and something my father and mother always said to us, that if you don't want to be dependent on the government, if you don't want somebody to control your destiny, the thing that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary, that little extra, is an education.
Yep.
Read. Write. Arithmetic. Continue your education. Because if not, the government is more than willing to take care of you because it gives them a reason to ask for more money through taxes or whatever. And so where am I going with this, Andrew? If we don't make education in the classroom a priority, where we give these kids the best chance to be educated so they can hone their skills, enhance their skills, and grow their skills, what we're talking about today is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. And it does seem that American education is being dumbed down. And I'm telling you, that is dangerous, especially for the new generation, X or whatever they call themselves, who are our future.
Yep, I got my kids are 16 to 26, so they're all in that cohort of two different, the end of the millennials, the beginning of the Zs, or whatever you want to call them. I've watched with education. I watched my two youngest go through the COVID years of being really disillusioned with school. I watched my oldest, her senior year of college, losing it to COVID. So I saw all the things you said, but what we didn't do was we did a lot of bemoaning and gnashing of teeth about it. We still haven't had a conversation of what is education in the year of our Lord 2024 and going forward in America going to be. Because we told an entire generation of students exactly what we thought of education. We think education is a giant jobs program and daycare facility. And that's how we treated it. And they believed us. I talked to them. I've seen their friends. They got very disillusioned with it. And we haven't seen yet the political ramifications of that. We need to go back and have a fundamental understanding of what education is, understand one size fits all education isn't going to work, really utilize this technology and understand that, like, no, not all kids are going to go to college, even though we've made the secondary education system a pipeline to college because of funding reasons for higher education. We can hash that out some other time. We need to reinvest in things like trades. We need to reinvest in things like technology. One of the biggest things going right now, they have these code camps in the summer where kids want to learn how to code based off of things like Minecraft. We need to be encouraging that and not just have a jobs program and daycare center. Actually teach these kids the reading, writing, arithmetic that you said. I did good on 2 out of 3 of those. I'm still bad at math. But we can also take an evolutionary step in education while we're doing that, of understanding the times are changing, and just having another government bureaucracy with the word education slapped on it isn't doing anybody any good.
Steve? Jordan, are you speaking? I can't hear. Go ahead, Jordan.
Which is artificial intelligence. We have to deal with that. That's going to make a lot of jobs that used to be done by people, done by machines and by computers. So the new world we're in today, we have to deal with that. And I think a lot of people are not really dealing with that in a very significant way.
Steve?
So I would take it to another level. I have 6 children. I personally homeschooled the last 3 when my other child came down with stage 4 cancer. I've educated him in 6 different ways, from Montessori schools to public schools. The public schools cannot be fixed. Can't be fixed. We got to get every kid we can out of public schools. Every Republican person running says they're going to get away with the Department of Education. They don't. They put a person in, nothing happens. So anything we can do in the United States of America to get parents to get their kids out of public schools, we should. We will lower the cost. We'll get better education. I have a 16-year-old son who's going to graduate from college this year, 16, off to grad school. So most of my kids are like that, with graduate degrees, multiple graduate degrees. It's because we in the Laffey family prize education the way your father did, Armstrong. And I see what it does to people. And not every kid should go to college. But we're still taking this square peg and we're driving into a round hole every single day somewhere in Denver or Detroit at $25,000 a student. And kids are not learning, they don't want to go to school, and they can't do math. So math, as I said before, math could be like almost free. A lot of the stuff that goes on in the world is free. If we just made a national movement to understand that the public schools were taken over by union, and it's not the Little House on the Prairie TV show you might have watched as a kid, parents, it's totally different. And we've got to move our kids into what they're going to be good at. Some are going to be nuclear engineers and some are going to be plumbers. And they should be studying that at a much younger age. And the parents have to have total control over this, not the union steward at a public school. So now I live in a state where we have lots of charter schools and people make lots of choices. So there's lots of competition. You go back to where I come from in Rhode Island, there's none. And so kids get a terrible education. Kids in the city get a terrible education. The Generation Z people have been terribly educated. Ask them how to make change at a store, and you watch half of them fumble around. So that's why they don't want cash. People can't make change. So we have a terrifying situation in America where we have a younger generation who haven't learned what they need to be successful, and are now not going to teach it to their kids, if they have any. Another whole demographic problem. So that's the number one thing. Get them out of the public schools. Get them out now. If you're listening, it's not okay. Your school's not okay. And do something else, even if it requires sacrifice.
Yeah, but obviously, I understand exactly your sentiments. And you're correct. But are we just going to give up on the public schools?
Yes.
I mean, we just have too many kids. Not every kid is going to be able to go to these schools that you talk about, the private schools that are being homeschooled, and particularly when you have absentee fathers in the household. These mothers have become so many things to these kids. The reality of what you're saying here, what he's saying to us, Andrew, is that we cannot save the public schools, and I don't think many of us want to accept that.
We can't. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew.
You might be totally right. But like Kennedy put a man on the moon, a president has to get up and say, we are failing, and here's a 10-year plan to help our children. Help me do this.
Andrew?
Yeah, I understand the sentiment, and like him, my kids have gone through private school, public school, online school. I've got 2 different kids that did split programs where they took college classes and are taking college classes as high school students. I have a kid that dropped out of school and went back and is in an alternative program now getting ready to graduate, and I'm very proud of her as well. Kids need different things. The truth is, we've gone through probably one of the biggest parent choice movements we're going to see because of the post-COVID, and we're still going to have 90% of kids in public school. I get the sentiment. My parents were both public educators for their entire careers. My father went to a one-room school till he was in 8th grade. You want to talk about the generational shift. So I understand the sentiment, but no, we're not going to be able to abandon the public school. The main core problem with the public schools, besides just the bureaucracy and all that, though, is they are not designed to shrink. We've been talking finances today. Trees don't grow to skies. We need to right-size schools. And then the idea that we're going to do an austerity program where you downsize schools back to the local level where they need to be and where they'll actually be effective is not going to be a good sell, and you're not going to win office like that. I'm afraid it's going to take something truly catastrophic to get the kind of change in public school you need to have in public school. But no, you're not going to ever be able to abandon public schools totally, because it's still 90% of students. There's lots of students that don't have the parent situation to have the proper support to do online and other programs. We need more than just one-size-fits-all education, but we're going to have a real fight. And let's not kid ourselves. There's going to be a lot of pain and suffering involved in fixing public education to the extent that it can be fixed. I am skeptical, but we're going to have to try to do something for those kids.
Jordan, we know you're on Wall Street and you have to keep checking the stocks, so don't worry about the noise. We can handle that. You just focus on the conversation. Finally, with you, looking at the global economic landscape, what role do you see the United States playing in fostering international economic stability and growth, Jordan?
Well, we are the leaders of the world. I mean, China is imploding right now. They have this huge overhang of all this real estate, which was built, never going to be completed. So they're in really bad shape. Japan's coming back a little bit. Europe is still in recession. We've still got the Ukraine war, which is hurting Europe in various ways. Obviously, the Middle East is in tremendous turmoil. Oil prices have gone up. We are the leaders of the world. We have our problems, Armstrong, but compared to the rest of the world, we are still the shining light on the hill.
You know, I just cannot thank all of you today for joining us. Tom Garner, Steve Laffey, it's always a pleasure. You know, we also have to recognize Andrew and Jordan. There's a spiritual illness in this country. There's a lack of moral leadership and values. And everybody's looking for something to plug into. And everything that's out there that's politically incorrect works for them. Kids and parents fight against a lot now. There's so much that's competing for their souls and their attention. And sometimes the parents are at their wits' end. They just feel like they just cannot win. They seem so desperate. The churches are not what they used to be. Fathers are not where they used to be. And so it's a desperate situation for America. But I still believe, like someone said, America is still that shining city on the hill. Thank you for joining us. I'm Armstrong Williams. Enjoy your weekend.